Welcome back, Rabbi Dr. Eliezer Brodt. So nice to have you again for this special edition on the Haggadah shel Pesach. Rabbi Eliezer, you've shared with me that you've been obsessed, addicted, hyper-focused on Haggadahs for close to 35 years. Now, anybody who walks into a Sfarim store could see that every single year there's just piles and piles, tables worth of new Haggadahs. I opened the Jewish publications. I just saw Art Scroll, tiny lines and lines and lines of Haggadahs that are available just in English. So just from Art Scroll, and it's infinite the amount of Haggadahs that are available. So who better than Rabbi Brodt to give us a little bit, maybe straighten out for us what's available, how we can find what we're looking for. Perhaps maybe the best way to go about it is just open a Haggadah and prepare the Haggadah and see what you come up with yourself. However, many people enjoy looking through Haggadahs, all the different Pirushim, Rishonim, Achronim, different styles, different paths to follow. So, Rabbi Brodt, we figured it'll be let's spend a few minutes going through some of it. And I know you could spend hours and hours and hours and days and weeks talking about this. So let's see how much you could cram into 45 minutes.
Okay, yes, we'll definitely try our hardest to cram it in.
So where do you want to start? What's the goal? What are you trying to get at? What are you trying to get out of this presentation? What should people get out of this presentation?
Okay, so the first thing is that in general there's one point to mention is that there's a Sefer Hasidim. That's how it's known, but it's really called Sefer HaMaskil, from a nephew of the Rosh. That he says that it's proper before Yom Tovim, before the Parsha, to prepare the Parsha, the Tfilos that one says on the Yom Tovim, and he also mentions the Haggadah of Pesach. So it's important. We're about to begin, and for some of us it's two Sedarim, others only one Seder, but it's a nice long amount of time to spend some time to what's there out there that could help us get through the Seder properly. That's number one. And the Maril actually later on also brings us down for Yom Tovim to spend time to do it. That's so my first intention over here is that it should make it possibly a little easier to know what's out there. Okay, that's number one.
Okay, and number two?
Now, another thing I also like is to say at the outset is two small points. One is that I'm sure people are going to complain that I'm missing this important work or that important work. As you mentioned, it's only 45 minutes. When we hear the numbers of the Haggadahs that are out there, we'll understand why it's not physically possible to talk about all of them. There's not an attempt to accomplish everything. It's just a smorgasbord, as I like to call it, of some of the material out there. Number two, there's a Sheva Musar, which is very important to remember, which is basically he says something to the effect that each person's taste of a sefer could be different. And the reason it has to do with is sometimes people are connected to a certain sefer or to a certain mahalach. So some people might like drush, some people might like halacha, some people might like pshat, some people might like remez, some people like Kabbalah, and there's definitely all that available out there with the Haggadah shel Pesach. So keep that in mind also before listening or as you listen to this presentation.
Okay, so hopefully after a person listens to this presentation, he'll have maybe a little bit of clarity, some more clarity in what talks to him, what's available for purchase, and to peruse as he prepares for Pesach. Like you explained, it's a very important night. People like to be prepared somewhat as they sit down to their Seder. Okay, so as we mentioned, there's a lot out there. So what's your first tip? What should a person do? What's the first thing a person should do before he starts looking for his latest Haggadah? And I have to mention, somebody sent me an email and said that I don't know the words he used, but he said out of FOMO, fear of missing out, for those who don't know what that stands for, he said he bought 21 new Haggadahs this year. Is that even possible? There are 21 new Haggadahs this year?
Supposedly there's much more than 21 new Haggadahs, but I don't know about those Haggadahs at this point. But yeah.
Okay, everyone should have as much time to look through a few pages of 21 Haggadahs.
Yeah.
Okay, so
anyway,
where would you like to begin?
Okay, so the first tip, just to keep in mind, is that there's a fascinating Netziv worth looking at carefully, but the Netziv basically says in Perek Yud Gimel in Chumash Shemais Pasuk Ches, it comes out from the Netziv that there's an Indian to do Tzipur Yitzis Mitzrayim all 7 days of Pesach. So when you look at the amount of literature your children might bring home, or all the books that are out there, how can one do it in one night or 2 nights? So there's at least a Netziv that you have all of Pesach to discuss it, and that's part of what this Pesach is all about. So it's kedai to divide up a little bit over the many meals to discuss a little bit about Yitzias Mitzrayim. Okay, that's just a small little tip. Okay, now the first before anything is the first question is how many Haggadahs are there out there? This is a question that I'm always asked. Is there even a way to know? So basically, it seems I'm not able to say this, but some bibliographers have said this. The topic that perhaps has been written about the most in Jewish literature is the Haggadah Shel Pesach. There are in many languages with all kinds of perushim, pictures, whatever style one could possibly think of in Drush, Kabbalah, Halacha, Musar, Hasidus. There, and like everything else, people specialize in collecting Haggadahs, even though they don't collect regular Svarim. Every once in a while, you'll see in a newspaper, magazine, they'll have an interview with one of these types of collectors. I once, a few years back, was at a guy that he had over 4,000 Haggadahs, which is an incredible amount that he collected for over 50, 60 years. Anyway, the point is that there's many types of Haggadahs.
And why do you think Haggadah is something that people have an affinity to specifically?
Why? I don't know. This is a good question. What's special about it? I don't know. I guess the excuse is that it partially has to do with a mitzvah. People are, it relates a lot about Chumash. Yitzias Mitzrayim is one of the most fundamental things in Yiddishkeit, and the way the Haggadah actually is set up at the Leil HaSeder. So I guess some of those are some of the factors about it. But each person, I don't know, because each collector, they have different reasons what struck them to start collecting their Haggadah collections. So I don't know exactly why. It's a very good question.
Are you the person who has 4,000 Haggadah? It can't be you because you're not around 50, 60 years, but how many do you have?
No. I believe in you don't count them because it's Ayin Hara. But some people do count them, and they whatever. Okay. And then also there's a question how you count them. If let's say you have a God that has 10 perushim of 10 different people, is that 10 perushim, 10 Haggadah? Anyway, fine. Bottom line is, moving right along, is in 1901 there was a bibliographer named Shmuel Wiener. He started making a bibliography of the Jewish Haggadahs to list them out there. As late as 1960, the great bibliographer Avram Yari, he wrote a book called Bibliography Shel Haggadahs Leil Pesach. He started the list. This is how it looks. People like to see, show, and tell. So, and he came to a list of 2,700 Haggadahs. Okay. This list, after he completed his list, the different bibliographers wrote into all different Haggadahs that he missed, and not everything was his fault because they're found in all over the world, different collections. This predates the internet that we have today, where everything is a click of a button. Anyway, later on, in 1997, from Hebrew University, Yitzhak Yudalov printed his version of a bibliography, an incredible job. He has his final number, only up to Haggadahs, including till printed in 1960, is 4,715. Now, when they include a Haggadah, it's any type of Haggadah. It does not necessarily mean it has a parish. Of course, since 1960, there's many more Haggadahs have been printed. Just this year alone, there's 30, 40 Haggadahs. And again, if you're going to include every type of font, forget about it. It's endless. Anyway, bottom line is, it's become a minhag for many people, is when you go to the Svarim store, is that before Pesach, you have to have a new Haggadah. Okay. So that's the first thing. The number out there, it's a very large number, and the number just keeps on getting bigger. As we speak, probably, there's another Haggadah being printed. Anyway, yeah.
You got away pretty easy on that one without giving a number. How many Haggadahs are out there? Any recommendations for somebody who wants to understand? When was the Haggadah written? Who wrote it? When was it set up? And how has it progressed over the years? The Ram has a different Haggadah. What's the classic Haggadah, and what different Haggadahs are out there, I guess, throughout the generations?
Okay, so there's a lot. I'll regalachas just to mention a few of them. One is a classic. It's printed in the early 50s. Menachem Kasher, basically famous for the Torah Shleima. He began working on a project to do similar to what he did with the Torah Shleima on the Haggadah Shleima. And he basically, towards the beginning already, he commissioned Rabbi Shmuel Ashkenazi, someone that I was able to get to know very well over many years, who was nifter in the beginning of Corona. And he did most of the work. And basically what this Haggadah has in the beginning is it has a series of many chapters where it discusses all different anything you might have wanted to know about the Leil Seder. It's approximately 40 chapters. You want to know a collection of the Rishonim and some important early Achrayim, what happened in a very systematic, organized manner. This was the place to look. Not only it's part of the point is that it's not 20 volumes, it's one volume. It's not so thick. You could see it's available even today. And as the case with many of Rabbi Ashkenazi's writings, it's well written, very well organized. It's based on a very wide range of sources, including manuscripts, Geniza fragments, and it's formed the basis for virtually all good Haggadahs since, from the 1950s and onwards. When we talk about the Leil Seder and different aspects, they're using this Haggadah. Many quote it b'shmai, and some do not. The second part is also an important work because it's based on pshat, collecting from something like 50 Haggadahs with very clear written through the Leil Seder. Brings you on the top the nusach of the Haggadah, and the bottom will have the perushim of pshat. So if someone's sitting at the Seder and you have this Haggadah, this is very useful. A lot of times people ask a pasha pshat question. Here you have it in the bottom. Okay, till today this is sort of like a classic, both in the Torah world and in the academic world. Okay. I'm actually working on putting out updates of his from the past 50 years that he wrote on the sides and he put in papers inside his Haggadah Shleima. Depending on if I find the time and funding for it, it will happen faster. Anyway, this is one Haggadah that's very much quoted and very useful and available till today. Another important Haggadah was written around the same time, which is from Daniel Goldschmidt, famous for his Machzairim, which is more academic with the manuscripts, also very useful. Until today, one could get it easily. It's not as extensive as the Ashkenazi / kosher Haggadah Shleima, but it's also extremely, extremely useful. Another more recent useful Haggadah, a work on Haggadah is from Pesach Toiris from Professor Yosef Taburi of Bar Ilan. He talks about a lot of the aspects that in general are also Negea, the Negea in Leil HaSeder, how Lechem Mishnah plays out, Natilas Yadayim on vegetables, Yayin, and all different things, but a lot of things related to the Seder also very useful and available today. One last work in this section that I would like to mention is from Professor David Henschke called Manashtana, a beautiful, beautiful Haggadah. This book only came out a few years ago. It came out in Yerushalayim. Immediately it sold out. 2016, it sold out literally in 2 weeks. It was reprinted in time for Pesach. Today you could get it relatively easily from the Magnus website. Now, what's the significance of this Haggadah? So like this, I'm just going to say very bekitzer. It's Professor Henschke. It was a Einikel from the Hirsches, the Breuers. He's a tremendous Talmud Chacham. He learned in the yeshiva world under Reb Shlomo Fisher. He's a close Talmud, Reb Gusman. And for a while, he was a regular Magachir in the Mizrahi Datilumi Yeshiva. He has a tremendous command in even Kachim and Tyrus, like unbelievable. His works show, in general, and this work particularly shows an incredible command of Chazal and onwards. But he also shows, at the same time, impressive breadth in academic literature, has a deep understanding and how to use it with all the new methods. He's also very big mechadish, and he has a lot of times he has a fresh look on the materials of the Leil HaSeder. It's done with tremendous Yirah Shamayim, with tremendous respect for the Achrayim he talks about. In general, Professor Henschke, I heard many shiurim from also. It's very pshat. It's attempt to be pshat. He discusses with the Midrashi Halacha, etc., etc. And if one wants to have some samples, not necessarily a material that's in the book, but chapters that parts of it did form into the book later on, I mean, say they're not identical chapters of the book, but material that could be found in the book, we're more than happy to send you some samples on the Leil Seder, but it's very iyundik. It's one requires to sit down and learn it. It's like learning a iyundik, a shtickle Torah, but it will help you change and understand from the many people that have gotten feedback about it after I recommended it to a lot of people. They're very tzufrieden with this book. You can email me at eliezerbrodt@gmail.com, and I could send you some chapters of his material about it.
Okay, excellent. As you mentioned, your email address, and if anybody wants to get lists of available Sforim and articles, B'chlal, every Yom Tov, Eliezer sends out. You didn't send that yet for Pesach, right? You're still sending? So if they want, they could send Eliezer Brodt an email at eliezerbrodt@gmail.com to get added to that list as well. Okay, so the many people who want to know where they can find relevant halachas to the Leil Seder, Pesach B'chlal, what do you recommend for that?
So halacha, already from the times of the Rishonim and onwards, the drashas before Shabbos HaGadol, and they also wrote many chiburim, they dealt with the halachas of the Leil HaSeder, very specific. and there's constantly new discoveries being printed. Just last week, or 2 weeks ago, Professor Yaakov Spiegel printed a Talmud of the Rush, drushes, which also has in the Sefer Drushes Al Torah has at least one or two drushes related to Pesach with many halachas. So it's constantly being changing. So one could always find, you go to the Svarim store that year, there's usually going to be some new Rishon with the halachas of drushes. From Achronim, it's also the same type of story. Just to mention one, as it wasn't available for many years, and in recent years it's become again available, is Rabbi Yitzchak. He gave a drasha in 1587. He was the Rav in Prague, and it was very rare, very important drasha with a lot of halachas. But interestingly enough, it was written in the form of a shir. There's a lot of Kabbalah in it also, and he authored other works in the form of song. There's other people that did a similar such thing. Marshal did it. The Marshal we know did it for Leil HaSeder specifically because it's easier to remember, to keep people interested. Maybe that's why he did it. Bottom line is that there's a lot of Achronim that constantly being discovered or rediscovered, or new manuscripts or things that weren't available for hundreds of years because of being rare. And now people always looking for something new. But fast forward to more contemporaries. One of the first contemporary works that's written on the Leil HaSeder, all the halachas going from beginning to end, is called Vayagid Moshe from Rav Katz. It's printed by his brother. He dies in the Holocaust. Somehow the work survives. The Rav Katz's nephew worked on putting out the work properly, and I think even this year, a new edition of this Vayagid Moshe came out. It's full of valuable information about the Leil HaSeder, halachadik, Hasidish Makairis, and other Makairis, and it's quoted in a lot of the Likutim on the Leil HaSeder. But, and every year, literally, many Svarim come out on halachas of Leil HaSeder. In my humble opinion, till today, one of the best works that's written, even though it was written before the various search engines such as Eitzar Chachma, Google Books, is the Seder HaAruch. It's a 3-volume set from Rav Weingarten, and this is here just to see one of the volumes. Is this? I think it's still. I'm pretty sure it's still available on the Leil HaSeder. It's over 600 pages. It's the volume 1 is the halachas. Volume 2 is Haggadah, which he sets up very well, dealing with machshava and Haggadah, going through the Seder, also organized based on a wealth of sources. And volume 3 is the Haggadah Shel Pesach, and he sets it up very pshat oriented. A lot of the questions that everyone has when you have a Seder, people ask basic questions quickly. You don't have time to pull out all the millions of books that exist. There could be stuff up in Hasidus, Kabbalah, Rishayna, everything could be in there, and it's very easy because sometimes people don't have time to prepare so much. Easy, well written, straight to the point. And if someone wants to have material to say over, a boy wants to impress his future shver or his shver, it's also a great cheating sefer. Anyway, bottom line is these 3 volumes are kedai to get. 2 last works in the halachic thing, even though, as I mentioned, there's many more. Rav Yosef has a Chazan Avadia many years ago, which was simanim of different specific yunim on different parts of the Seder with impressive haskamas. It was 2 massive volumes, and later on in his set, a Chazan Avadia, which he ended up doing on a lot of the Mayadim and Shabbos. He has one on Pesach, also incredible Kedarka B'Kodesh of many different Marmakaimis on the Leil HaSeder. One last item to mention, it's come out in the recent years, Rav Mazuz has a 2-volume work so far, Hai Nisi, I believe it's called. Very useful, interesting, not the typical type of material on the Leil HaSeder, halacha, minig, his own type of tyrus, and one could find very interesting stuff to say over at the Seder. I'll call upon him that's some of a small amount of the halacha aspects of the Leil HaSeder that's out there.
Okay, so after someone has time to go through all that, he still has a little bit more time, and he's looking for some likutim. Maybe he didn't find the vart, to impress his family in the previous svarim. What kind of likutim are there out there? Haggadahs that are malakit from different, I guess, Rishayim, Achronim, they're famous ones. Yeah.
So first we'll start with the actual texts of the Rishayim, and then we'll go through Achronim, and then we'll get to if you really want to just have a good cheating sefer out there. So first, Rishayim, some people like to have Rishayim, they like to learn through the Rishayim. So in 1998, Meiser of Cook printed a beautiful edition of the Haggadah in their set Tyrus Chaim, and it instantly became a classic bestseller. It sold out already that first year. I think it was printed 2 or 3 times already. This Haggadah has 12 different Perushim of Rishayim based on manuscripts and has very useful footnotes. It's very worthwhile for one to spend time learning this, not obviously during the Seder, but to get the Pashup shot in what's going on in the various parts of the Haggadah. It takes a lot of time and patience, and it's not easy. It might be kedai to spend a year each year to go through one or two such perushim and make notes, but in general, many of the Pashup Shak questions could be found in these Rishonim, and it's a very beautifully done Haggadah. But there are numerous works of Rishonim, constantly being, sometimes the new ones are being discovered, and Ein L'Davar Seif, I'm not going to mention all of them that are out there. I have Rachmanis on everyone. One Haggadah Meister Cook ended up putting out little more recently was from Rav Asher Areli's brother in his set called Teres Rishonim. So he has a Teres Rishonim Haggadah where he collects a lot of Rishonim on the Haggadah. Let's say Rabbeinu Bechai has a piece on the Haggadah. He puts it in there, and Rabbi Shua ben Shua, all these types of pieces related to the Haggadah that are not, and he doesn't play around with it. He just puts you the text. So if you like Rishonim, it's also useful. One last thing for Rishonim is, as I said, there's constantly new things happening. So just last week, a new lika came out of the Rambam and Beis Midrashay from Rav Zevald and others from Bnei Brak. Should be available in America already, maybe even already today or any day now. Basically, a work which he collects the Rambam. Other people did it also, but he seems to have more material. The Rambam and his son, anything connecting to the Leil HaSeder, and that's some on some very very bekitzer of the Rishonim that are out there on the Leil HaSeder.
Okay, wow, it's only 21 minutes so far, something like that. Okay, so contemporary Haggadahs, you up to there?
A contemporary, not yet. No.
Not yet. Oh,
21
okay.
minutes. I still have time. I have time. Okay.
Time.
So first we'll go through Achronim. Okay. Achronim, a lot of times, not because we're on a high madrega necessarily, but sometimes it talks to us more. It's closer to our tkufa, so we like and enjoy the lashon, the longer lashon, so it speaks to us more. So one of the first Haggadahs printed is the Abarbanel Zevach HaPesach. It's first printed in 1505. The first Haggadah that has a parish that's printed, and it's printed numerous times. So I think somewhere I saw over 100 times. It's printed in English. Art Scroll has it. I think some other people have translated it. I do not know the differences. But Meister of Cook in recent years, has also put out a nice edition of it. Now, like this. What is the Abarbanel? So everyone's famous. It's famous. The Abarbanel asks many questions. There's a famous joke that many people went off the derech because on Shabbos they used to, after the Suda, they would start learning the kashas of the Abarbanel, and then they would fall asleep before they got to the answers. So they whatever. Okay, but anyway, by the Haggadah, he has approximately 100 questions, and he proceeds to answer them in a very clear manner, al pi pshat. And it's considered till today one of the classics. It's beautiful. It's very, very kedai to go through 1 year, maybe 2 years, however long it takes. The Mamloyas Haggadah is heavily based on it, and it sets the tone actually for a lot of Pshat Haggadahs later on. L'dogma, one Haggadah to talk about is the Maisa Hashem. The Maisa Hashem didn't write a Haggadah, but he wrote a work al Torah, Rabbi Eliezer Ashkenazi, the Bendar of the Ramah and Rabbi Yosef Cairo, one of the Gedolei Adar of that Kufa. Also is very Pshat oriented. So he has in his parish al Torah called Maisa Hashem. There's a Haggadah, a running parish on the Haggadah. Today, like everything else, they made a beautiful edition just of this Haggadah, more than one edition of it. Worthwhile to buy, very Pshat oriented, and he also deals a lot with Abarbanel. Anyway, moving right along as the clock ticks, we have the Gra Haggadah. The Gra, this was actually one of the first writings of the Gra printed. And there's numerous editions of this Haggadah. There's a lot of Pshat stuff. There's also Kabbalah stuff in there. One edition of this Haggadah that I would recommend is from a Nobel, I believe his name is. He did a very nice job. The footnotes are very useful in understanding the Gra. A lot of times, if we take for granted certain pieces and we think you understand them, and then people ask them, and people ask questions on them, and they quote him on different things. But if you learn it very, very carefully, you see there's a lot happening there, and it's very well worth one's time to go through some of those pieces. Some pieces have become classics. Moving right along, around the same time, is a Haggadah called Marbel Saper. Marbel Saper, the author was Rabbi Didyah Til Weil, son of the Karban Sanel, on the Rush. This Haggadah was printed in 1791, and until 2002 was not reprinted. It's interesting it doesn't say the author's name in it, but we know that it is him. As early as in the same Tkufa, with Ezra Fleckless, which we'll discuss his Haggadah shortly, he quotes something from it, and he says that he's the author. Anyway, we know for sure it's the author. We know we have we have other Kisveyat of his, and we have the Ksaviyat of this Haggadah actually exists in Hebrew University today. Anyway, this Haggadah, it's not limited to Pshat. It includes Drush and Remez also. He has interesting explanations, stuff that one could say over at the table. He has material from his father. He even has some stuff from old manuscripts that he seemed to have had from Rishonim. Anyway, it's a worthwhile Haggadah. A version of the Haggadah will be found on Hebrew Books, which Agav, Hebrew Books has well over 1,000 Haggadahs. This is how the Marble Sapphire Haggadah looks in the new edition. Worthwhile checking out. Another Haggadah, Meiser Rebbe Eliezer, is Rebbe Eliezer Fleckless. He was born in 1754, dies in 1826. He's from the Mishpacha of the Kliyakar, famous Darshan from Prague, but he's a Talmud Muvik by the Rebbe Yehuda. He eventually takes him over. And besides for being a Goyin Olam and a Paisik, he was also an unbelievable darshan. We have a few volumes of his drush, which have been very hard to find until recently. The Machon in Borough Park has taken upon themselves and printed a few of these volumes. They also recently printed his Haggadah, a beautiful, beautiful edition of Haggadah, a lot of drush, and a lot of good stuff to stay over, not the typical type of material out there. Okay. Moving along, another Haggadah in Achrayim that also gets very much quoted is the Nesivos Haggadah. Now, just to stress, the Nesivos, even though in the yeshiva world everyone knows, he sort of gets he's always the machlekes with the ksais, and people don't necessarily realize how chashuv the Nesivos was. They know he's chashuv, but they don't understand how chashuv he is. So a friend of mine, Eli Markin from Lakewood, he actually mentioned to me once he was looking at something and he came across a fascinating thing in the Chachmas Adam from the Chai Adam. So he writes in his introduction on Chachmas Adam, which is on Yeredeya, that he was zeicha to meet the Nesivos. Now you have to understand, the Chai Adam was a dayan in Vilna. He knew the Gra, and he knew many Gedolim. He's a Talmud of the Rebbe Yehuda, so he saw the big giants out there. When he talks about the Nesivos, he says, "V'kibalti pnei gadol hadar pe'er hazman hagoyin hagadol tzadik v'anav Yaakov al mechaber sefer Haggadahs." And then a minute later, when he talks about V'chein Amar li Yedidi Hagoyin Hagadol Moireinu Chaim Valazhin Zal. I know he's good friends with Chaim Valazhin, and it's interesting to note the title how he refers to the Nesivos. Al Kol Panim, the Nesivos Haggadah is considered a special Haggadah. There's new editions of it, and that is very well known. Okay, another famous Haggadah worth mentioning is from the Netziv, also available in new editions with Biurim. And here it's Kedai just to, we mentioned all the way in the beginning, I said that the Netziv says you could do it all 7 days. So there's a famous legend. At this point, I'm not able to find sources for it, but there's a famous yeshiva lore, so to speak, which they say. I recently heard my Rav, Rabbi David, Rabbi Avishai David, he said this over, he heard it numerous times, or Soloveitchik saying it over, the contrast between the Leil HaSeder by the Netziv and the Beis HaLevi. And they say that basically the Beis HaLevi, the Leil HaSeder, they were all nervous. They were nervous if there was chametz still in the house, if the matzah is not chametz, it was burnt to charcoal, if they're going to make every possible thing they were nervous about. Is they going to make chatzais? If they ate the right amount, and the Talmidim that ate by the Beis HaLevi, they walked out. They felt pashat that were they even yaitza the mitzvahs, whereas the Talmidim that ate by the Netziv, they talk about how the Seder was unbelievable. And we do have accounts of people that were by the Netziv, by the Seder, and they heard all the Tyrus of his. This Tyra ended up being in the Mei Shefer, his Perish al Haggadah. Some of it is found in his work al Tyra. It's very kedai to learn the parashas of Shemais Rabbi from the Netziv one year, or his Perish on this. Very pshat, incredible stuff. And also, they said that at the end of the Seder, he said Shir Hashirim, and on that also, he has a Sefer on Shir Hashirim, incredible, so he would expound on all his Tyrus, the contrast of the different Sedarim. Anyway, moving right along, just to finish up, a few last names. I'm just mentioning all different types of names, because it could be one will talk to one person or to a different person. There's Rabbi Shua Heller, another great guy from Avlita, has a parish Arli Yesharim. There's Rabbi Yosef Zechariah Stern, another great guy in Zecher Yosef has a Haggadah. These are beautiful, beautiful Haggadahs. And to conclude with three, four more Haggadahs of Achrayim, what I call, there's the Minchas Ani from the Aruch LaNer. It's been the first time it was printed was from manuscript in the early 70s. Then they reprinted it more recently. It's available. There's the Arkhashohan Haggadah from the Arkhashohan, and here I must say, when I first got it, I couldn't put it down. I was reading it for hours straight. It's unbelievable drush, but drush that you could say over a lot of parts. the Arkhashohan you always picture as a paisik. You don't picture him as an unbelievable baldarshan with Yesodis and even some Kabbalah in there. But forget about the Kabbalah. The drush is beautiful. And to conclude this section is there's Rebuvim Margolis Haggadah. If you're a fan of Rebuvim Margolis' style, it's excellent. There's two parts actually. There's one part is a likut from different Hasidic Makayr stuff, very nice stuff to stay over, and also back to a lot of times the development of the Leil HaSeder, very geschmacka small pieces that one could say over with Rebuvim Margolis' Sharvarts can be found in this Haggadah. Also recently redone. It should be available. And the last Haggadah also was recently redone, also not so well known. Was Ratzi Farber, a great Litvish Haggadah, who ended up being in England. And his Haggadah was recently reprinted. Also, very, very nice stuff that one could say over. Akopanim, this is just, as I said, there's thousands of Haggadahs. Just to mention, as the time runs out on me, some of the Haggadahs that are out there.
Wow, fascinating. So since I'm talking to you, I could ask you how come you didn't mention Haggadah that I have used in the past. I found that it has a very nice structure of the whole Haggadah, and its questions and answers is the Malbim Haggadah.
So that's a great question, and we're not going to go into it, but it's been very heavily debated. It is a beautiful Haggadah, but it's been heavily debated in the past 5-10 years. Who is the author of this Haggadah? Lots of articles have been written about it, and each one has tried to make a case that it is the Malbim. The other side has made strong cases that it's not the Malbim. So therefore, I didn't mention in the list, but I know many people love the Haggadah because it's similar to the Malbim style, and it's a very useful Haggadah. And as you said, it does go through a lot of the parts, very pshat-oriented, and it's a worthwhile Haggadah to go through, whoever wrote it.
Very good. Okay, so I rushed you before, so I don't know if you're up to contemporary yet. I mean, real contemporary.
Likutim. So now we're ready. I have Rachmanis, so we'll go like this. First is useful likutim. So in recent years, there's endless amount of useful likutim. So one such one is the Lechvay, when Yosef Bixbam was nifter, Mechon Yishlayim rushed to get out of Eitzim Afarshi Haggadah, similar to their styles of other collections, and it's a very good Haggadah. It's a very nice likut. The editors try say that in the Hagdama they emphasize they're trying to be pshat oriented. They use many Haggadahs, and it's a very useful Haggadah till today. Also good material to say over. Another useful Haggadah that's come out in recent years, less than 10 years ago, is the Eizva Hadar Haggadah, which has a lot of halacha, a lot of pshat, a lot of chasidus, and it's a nice monstrosity. I mean, like everything else they do, they have all types. So I'm talking about the one that's like the all-in-one Haggadah from them. But that's likutim, and I'll just mention one because otherwise people, just to throw out there, a contemporary person of a Haggadah today. So there's a very nice Haggadah from Rabbi Victor Neventhal, one of the great Gedolim that we have, Baruch Hashem, still alive, the Talmud Muvak of Hashem Zalman Auerbach from the Iratika. So in his series called Yushalayim B'Moyadeh, so he has some very nice small say over pieces for the Leil HaSeder and the Haggadah, and other shmuzim relating to the Leil HaSeder could be found in his Haggadah. Okay, so this is just as I keep on saying, some of the materials out there to make it useful. Okay.
So we should have that whoever listens to this episode and has a Haggadah they enjoyed that wasn't mentioned here should send it in to us, either to Eliezer Brodt at gmail.com or to us at Oldaf or Parsha, wherever you want to catch us, either email or WhatsApp. It'll be fascinating to hear from all the listeners the Haggadahs that they enjoy. Okay, you want to put a wrap on this?
So I'm talking about two. I'm going to talk about just two more pieces I want to talk about. So one is like this. Sometimes people ask you, is there any unique Haggadah? So there's obviously there's many unique Haggadahs. One that I found very unique was written during the Holocaust by a Belzer Chassid, and he wrote a pirush, and he didn't just write a pirush. He had the Haggadah in the middle, and on the side he had something like 6 perushim. Here's a picture of how it looked. Not sure if it does justice to see it, but it's written beautifully. It's completely legible. Somehow his young daughter survived and was able to save this. He died. He was killed in the Holocaust, and it has all types of perushim. Chassidish Torah halacha. It's a beautiful, beautiful Haggadah, and eventually was redone in a much more user-friendly manner. And one could see it over here, and it's very, very useful, and it's great. It's great stuff, but it's unique. As a person during the Holocaust, during the crazy times, he was able to sit down and there's no cross-outs. 6 perushim going on in the Haggadah.
What's it called again?
It's called Haggadah Beis Avram Beis Aaron. And his name, let me just check his name. I know he was a Belzer Chassid. I believe his name is Rabbi Avram Aaron Friedman. Okay, and that's one unique Haggadah. And now I'd just like to conclude just to spend 3 to 4 minutes with the following. Leil Seder, everyone is as we said, everyone's always looking for Haggadahs, and they're looking for eitzes, how to make it interesting, and etc. etc. So there is another genre in the collecting of Haggadahs, and that's called picture Haggadahs. This began already in the time of the Middle Ages, and it still goes on till today. And the story is like this. In the 1960s, just as funny, there was the Diskin orphanage began to get people to give out some money to them. Every year they would find some rare exotic Haggadah, and they were printed in a very nice edition. Here's an example. Some of them are legible. It's called the Haggadah of the Chinese Jews, from a manuscript, and it has a whole fancy Haggadah of 3-4 pages, some unique things that one could find in it. A different Haggadah we have, the Haggadah of the Bnei Israel of India, and they have numerous Haggadahs from the 1960s onwards. They still, I don't know if they stopped or they stopped very recently, but it became a collector's item. There's something like 40, 50 of them, and each one, when you open it up, there's an introduction. A lot of them are written by Tovia Preschel and others, and they're illustrated, a lot of them, and you can learn from these illustrations a lot of minhagim, what they did in the day, and also a lot of times it's also for the different parts of the Haggadah. It's a good springboard. You have a kid and you show him this picture and you say, oh, what's going on here? And it triggers different things going on. Now, this is a huge subject. One could speak about this for hours. There's numerous books on just even on one Haggadah of on many different, let's say I mentioned already in the Middle Ages, so there's books on each manuscript already. There's whole books on them. But if let's say one wants to have a crash course, so there's two recent books about them. One is from Yosef Yerushalmi called Haggadah and History, which he took from many picture Haggadahs, 5 centuries worth, and he shows all different types of interesting things one could see from different Haggadahs that are illustrated over the years. Just to, another thing, the Chassam Sofer had a Talmud of the Chassam Sofer, made for the Chassam Sofer a present, an illustrated Haggadah. Here, this is a picture in the Haggadah. This is the Arba Banim. Here is the cities that with Paroi, another illustration. So a Talmud of the Chassam Sofer made for the Chassam Sofer this Haggadah, and he ends up giving it to his wife. The Chassam Sofer gave it to his wife. This German translation on the side, one could see, and I think the original is color. Here one could see this is German, and there's different editions of it, and so you see it was given as matanas, even by the Chassam Sofer. Another such Haggadah, just to mention, is the Koren put out a Haggadah. It's called Signs and Wonders, which they started. They actually, Yosef Yerushalmi does it more from the printing. They took even from manuscript Haggadahs, famous manuscript Haggadahs. Okay, but I'm not going to go into listing all of them. There's a lot to learn from them. I'm just going to be Messiah with two, 3 last points related to this. In 1526, there was Haggadah. It's the Prague edition of the Haggadah. It's considered by one of the most important illustrated Haggadahs ever to be published, and there's something like 60 pictures inside it. Anyway, one can learn from it. I've written articles in both Hebrew and English about it. You can learn a lot of different interesting halachas from it. And what's significant is it's written before the Shulchan Aruch, so it's very interesting to see certain things, how they were know. Okay. But the question is, in general, who are all these picture Haggadahs, and that's why I'm bringing it up, who are they meant for? So it would seem, and this already I see in the Avram Yari writes in the introduction to his volume, it was probably, and a good chance was to get who's the Leil HaSeder devoted, who's it for? It's geared for the children. And the special audience of the Leil HaSeder is the children, and the best tool is to get them to be able to get into it, to be able to Mekayim Vigad Levincha. At one time, I wrote an article which relates to various minhagim that we do throughout the Seder, and they're very well known. We do different types of things, also to get them into it. So pictures is a way through visual aid to get them to show. You're not just saying the Haggadah. For some, especially younger kids, it becomes very boring. So here, all of a sudden, you stop and you show them a picture from a Haggadah, and you say, "Oh, what's going on here?" And a lot of times, the pictures are based on midrashim, and it helps lighten up the mood for the adults too. Now, what's the significance of this? To be Messiah with this prat is Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach raised the issue that it might be a problem to look at illustrated Haggadahs on Pesach because it's not pashut one to look at captions of images on Shabbos. But if the pshat is it's to educate children, it might be that this is a limud zchus for looking at these Haggadahs. And it's clear from some of these Haggadahs, for example, there's a 1590 Haggadah from Prague who had in it the Rabbi Yitzchak, who I mentioned earlier, who gave the drasha. He was involved with the Haggadah. So if he's authorizing a picture Haggadah, and as I said, let's say the Chassam Sofer, he's giving his wife Haggadah and there's a caption underneath. Obviously, it's mutter. Why? Because this is a way. And the Chassam Sofer also, we know that he was very into the children for the Leil HaSeder, his wife, everyone should be able to participate. And that's a very important point in the Leil HaSeder, that even though there's so much material out there, it's still kedai to remember them who's the main audience for the Leil HaSeder. In many homes, it's the children, and one has to be very careful to make it guide for their age appropriate, as they say, and this is just some of the materials out there. And as I said, on the topic of the images, there's a lot to talk about. But this is just I feel that we got to cram in as much as we could in this short amount of time today.
Okay, wow. We should have done this like 3 months ago. But okay, so Mitzvah Shem, everyone can pick up a couple of Haggadahs and enjoy themselves, preparing for their little Seder. And together, we wish everybody a Chag Kosher v'Sameach. They should have a Seder where they're able to grow and have an Aliyah and Ruchnius and feel them becoming part of the Jewish nation as we become, once again, every year. There's a new Yetzias Mitzrayim. Once again, I just want to mention, if anybody wants to be part of the email list that Rabbi Brodt sends out with all his original chidushim of svarim and articles and all the things like that, just email him at eliezerbrodt@gmail.com. Okay, thank you very much, and everyone should have a wonderful Yontif.